This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
As a schoolgirl growing up in North Alabama, she may have best been described as a math geek. Today, she's best described as one of the most respected business leaders in the Southeast. She is president and chief executive officer of Gulf Power Company. Susan Story sits down for a visit on this edition of Conversations. Susan Story, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here, Jeff. Thanks for the invitation.
I love a great success story. How did you go from North Alabama to running one of the premier companies in the Southeast, Gulf Power?
Well, if you had asked me when I was growing up if this was what I would be doing, I would have no idea that this job even existed. I grew up in rural Alabama. My parents were hardworking people. They both worked in a cotton mill. We had a close family. And my dad was this brilliant man who always said I could do and be anything I wanted to be, and I believed him.
You had an affinity, I guess, for math. And why is that? What was it about the numbers that floated your boat, so to speak?
One of the things I think that really started me on the path to loving math was my dad. He was and is very smart in math. And when I was young, my brother and I, he would play math games with us. I remember 5, 6 years old, we would have these cards, and you would hold 5 cards up, and there would be a card turned up. It was called crypto. And in your head, you had to subtract, multiply, divide, and add, and come up with that number. And whoever could do it the most quickly is the one who won. So we played math games all the time. And then through school, I had some excellent math teachers, and it was logical and it was fun for me. And
now you went on to pursue engineering.
Yes.
And which was, when you were coming up through college, was not, I'm assuming, a regular thing for women. Is that correct?
That is correct. In fact, it was only after I started college that someone told me about engineering. My guidance counselor said, you're good at math, so you can do X, Y, or Z, but never brought up engineering because that was normally for guys. So in my freshman year at college, I had a guidance counselor who said, you know, have you thought about looking at engineering because you get involved in all of this math and physics and everything, and I just thought it was so great. And then when he told me I could make a decent living at it, I was even more excited about it.
You know, right now in this country, there seems to be so much focus on everything but math and science. We hear so much talk about folks, you know, from overseas being more math and science type people. Why do you think U.S. students are not as fired up about math?
One thing we know, Jeff, girls typically drop out of math and science between the 5th and 6th grade. They just kind of check out, even if they're required to take it in school. For boys, it's 7th and 8th grade. I think that we don't make it fun. I think we don't teach the practical applications of math and science. It's not about reading a chapter and working a problem on a piece of paper. I think the more real world we can make it, the better we are. For example, when Holly Benson was representative, the IHMC and Gulf Power and Holly started the I Love Science program in Escambia and Santa Rosa County. One day out of every month in every 5th grade class in these 2 counties, a volunteer comes in and does a gee whiz cool experiment. And it relates to science and something a lot of fun in science. We get tremendous feedback, and the kids love it because they see a practical application. Same thing about robotics competitions. I have seen inner city middle schoolers who said, well, I don't like math and science, but boy, building that robot or designing those steps and getting that robot to do something was a lot of fun. I think we miss the link between reading the book and doing things on paper versus helping kids do and see in the real world applications.
Which brings me to the question is, has our education system reached a point where maybe it's time to break it and remake it to better communicate with today's generation?
I think there are some good things really going on in education. I think, though, that anytime we think there's only one way to do things, then we're already defeated. I think that what we have to do, and there's so many innovative teachers out there, we have to find new and exciting ways to get kids to connect. It may have been that 30, 40 years ago, you could expect kids to sit behind a desk and concentrate for 30, 45 minutes. That's just not how kids are today. They live in a world of instant gratification. I want to do this, I want to go here. And you have to be quick and you have to be interesting or they lose attention. Well, we ought to find ways to help kids learn in that respect. I am a huge proponent of the career academies, for example, because in the career academy model, which we have in Escambia, Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, in fact, throughout Northwest Florida now, in those you have the same academic rigor as you have in other high schools, and you have hands-on real-world experiences. When those kids graduate, some of them, in fact, what we're finding, 50 to 60 to 70% go on to college, but the rest of them are qualified to begin work immediately in companies like Gulf Power or Cox Communications, or you name the company. I think that we need to step back and look holistically at education. Education starts from the time a child is able to learn in the home, and what do we do to support that structure? Through kindergarten, through grade school, middle school, high school, then if there's postgraduate, secondary education. But we have to look at the whole and say, how do we get kids fired up about it? Why? Kids love to learn. Okay, let's start with foundational things. Kids love to learn. Why don't we build on that love for learning and not bore them to death to where they feel like they're just going through the motions? So it's difficult though. If you have a class of 30 kids and they all like to learn differently, what do you do? But I think we've got to continue finding ways to connect with these kids and to release the creativity that they have. You ask about math and science. I've had some of my friends say, well, aren't arts and culture important? Absolutely. The fact is, though, that we are producing enough graduates from colleges and universities in most of those arenas. What we are struggling with, however, is in a lot of high-tech industries, the type of jobs we're trying to attract, we don't have enough graduates in Northwest Florida or in the state of Florida to go in and take those jobs, those high-tech math and science-related jobs. That's why it's important we focus on that and get more kids involved.
Talking about getting more hands-on experiences, is part of the answer to that getting corporations like yours more involved in the education system, do you think?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm involved in a lot of business groups throughout the state, and the first thing I do when I stand up in front of them is, I know what you say the problems with education are. Well, let me ask you another question before I get your answer on that. What are you doing about it? You know, it's one thing to sit back and complain about the education system. It's another thing for you and your company and your employees to get out there and do something about it. I don't think we have a right to complain unless we're doing everything we can to fix the problem. And we can't afford any longer as companies to sit back and expect educators and others to deliver us the employees we need. We've got to be in there helping people understand what we need and providing resources. And the areas I have seen education be most effective are where there are partnerships between businesses and education.
So more than just writing a check, but getting that hands-on, getting your employees involved with the students.
Absolutely, and I would go a step further than that. It's even beyond getting our employees involved. Our Career Academy donations don't come out of our charitable budget, they come out of our operations budget. Why that's important is we see our involvement in education not just as altruism, but as an investment into our future. These are our future employees. These are the people who are going to be working in our communities, making our communities strong, and that in turn makes our business strong. So first step is getting your company and employees involved. The second step is, do you view this as being charitable, or do you view it as a business imperative for your future?
Do you worry as a leader, as a CEO of a company, we have this big wave of baby boomers who are going to be retiring. Does it concern you that there may not be, to use a sports analogy, enough bench strength there, young people coming up in the math and science arena? Absolutely.
In fact, 60 to 70% of our employees will be eligible to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. And one of the reasons we've gotten so involved in the science and the career academies and the robotics competitions, those type of things, is so that we can help produce those future employees. Our answer is in two directions. Number one, as a company, we've got to get in there and help train the people that we're going to hire in the future. But the second part is we've got to look at technology. How does technology look in terms of changing how we do business? So what we want to do is get in there, but not just educate the way we always have, because it's not right for students, but also what are the type of jobs, not that we need at Gulf Power today, for example, but that we're going to need in 5, 10, 15 years in an environment that is much different. So part of this is the forward-looking, how do you teach people to learn for a lifetime? This is about not just the whats of what you teach children in school in terms of content, but the hows. How am I going to learn? How am I going to understand that what I know today will probably be obsolete in 2 years, in 3 years? Some statistics say that a young person entering their freshman year at college, that 80% of what they learn will be obsolete by the time they're seniors and graduate. What's most important is, are we learning how to learn? Are we learning how we go out there and we're able to be strategic to see not just what I know today, but what I need to know? And how am I going to get that information and education in a world that bombards us with information?
How do you as a leader try to figure it? Because technology is rapidly changing. I mean, it's just, every day there's something new. I mean, and we can go back several years ago. I take the iPod, for example. I mean, if we go back to the late 90s, how many of us thought we'd be walking around with something the size of a credit card that holds 1,000 songs? So how do you, as a leader, how do you try to stay ahead of the game?
The most important thing I do is listen. Listen to all different types of people, all age groups. One of the things we have to be careful of in business is we think, well, gee, I've been in this business 20, 25 years, I certainly know it. But we've got some young people coming up that we listen to. For example, one of our biggest recruiting tools, we use YouTube. We use Twitter, we use Facebook, we use all of this in our company. Now, I certainly wouldn't come up with those ideas to do that, so I'm glad I've got smart people coming up. And some of them, it's not an age thing. Some of them are just the techies that they want to be the first ones to participate. I think that number one, you have to listen. Number two, you have to understand that you always are having to learn and reinvent yourself. And the people, they've done study after study, the people who fall off the track, especially executives of companies or organizations, the biggest predictor of falling off the track are those who quit learning. The day you quit learning is the day you become obsolete. So what are your best ways to learn? Listen to everybody around you and be open and not be so set in the way you do things. And the second thing is just to continually be open to learning. And a big part of that is, how do you ferret through the mounds of information coming at you at what's important? So part of that is what's pertinent in my industry, but also from a big picture. One of the reasons that I'm very involved in organizations in the state of Florida, like the Florida Chamber of Commerce, the Florida Council 100, and the Economic Development Organization for Florida, is these policy issues that are political in nature, that are educational in nature, they all touch everything that our company does. And we've got to be out there understanding, how does this economic development policy affect Northwest Florida? How does it affect my business? And how do I become a contributor? I think that we all have a choice of sitting on the sidelines and complaining, or getting in the game and trying to do something. And I would hope, and I know that the most effective people and the successful people I know are the ones that get in the game and they play. They don't sit back in the stands and cheer or boo based on what other people are doing. They're part of the game. And I think that's what we all have to do.
As CEO, you have so many things, I'm sure, coming across your desk, not only trying to keep up with new technology, but also managing people. And I think any business person will tell you that's the toughest part of a job in most cases is managing people. Your case particular, you're managing executives, you're managing, maybe somebody who's more of a technical type. How do you juggle that?
A big part of it is understanding that we are a team, and every one of us makes that team strong. And it's almost like a football team. I love football, especially college football. And if you've got 11 quarterbacks on the field, then you're going to lose every game. If you've got 11 wide receivers, you're going to lose every game. So it's understanding that every member of the team is just as critical as the other member. And our roles may be different, but if we don't understand that, then we've already lost the game. So part of it is, number one, understanding we're all critical to the final result. The second piece is valuing and respecting every person for what they bring, and every person does bring something very special. And the third thing is having fun and coalescing around a goal. At Gulf Power, the most important thing that we all coalesce around is our customers. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what really matters. If we take care of our customers, everything else will take care of itself. The financials, regulatory, it will take care of itself if we take care of our customers. And I will tell you that having gone through 2 hurricanes here in Northwest Florida and being part of bringing the community back, I can honestly say that I get to work with my heroes every day. And it's a privilege and an honor, and I can never forget that.
Was that the most challenging part of your career so far, Hurricane Ivan?
It was the most challenging and also the most beneficial of all the things I've done in my career. I mean, it changed me personally and professionally. That morning that we were in the storm center and seeing the devastation and seeing just how good, I mean, I really got to see how good people are. And you have a few cases where there's some negative stuff, but good in terms of our employees. we had call center reps, for example, who lost everything, who were taking calls from customers who didn't lose half of what they did, and I heard them sympathizing and comforting the customers. We had people from all over the country and Canada here helping our customers, and some of them so moved that they would take money up to help a widow who didn't have anybody to help her. You know, it was just one of the most, you never want it to happen, but if it has to happen, you want to be in there, part of bringing everything back. Because I personally saw the best of our community and of people during that time.
How many years had you been CEO when Ivan occurred?
I had been CEO for 15 months.
Were you like, wow, here we go?
Yeah.
What prepared you throughout your career to take over? I mean, because you became Chief Executive Officer at a relatively young age.
43.
What was your secret? What's the secret sauce?
I think it was that I moved around a lot and I learned a lot. One of the things, and the question comes up a lot about, well, as a woman, did you find it harder to get through? Actually, it's a very technical company, so having an engineering degree helped. I worked in many different functions, including frontline. I've worked in a nuclear plant. I have crawled through equipment. I have worked out in districts with line crews. So I've worked in most areas of the business, so I understand the business. I have a technical background, so people knew I knew what our business was about. And the other part is, number one, it's the leadership part of how you deal with people. If I have to choose between position power and personal power, every day I will choose personal power as what's most important. People will follow you because of your position because they have to. They follow you as a result of personal power because they want to. And there's no comparison between which one of those is most important.
You have a reputation as being able to sit down with the executives and do what needs to be done there, but also make the folks who are in the technical side of the business very, very comfortable. And I've heard that from different folks. Do you attribute much of that to your background coming through that, or just your ability to sit down and listen and pay attention and show that concern and care?
I think it's both, but a lot of it comes from how I grew up. I mentioned before, my mom and dad both worked in a cotton mill, and my dad was a skilled craftsman. And I remember when I was 12 years old, my dad came home and he was shaking his head and he said, I know a way to save this company $500,000. And back when I was 12 years old, that was a huge amount of money. It's a huge amount now, but it was really big then. Right. And I was like, my eyes were big, and I thought, well, Dad, wow, that's great. And he goes, and I'll never forget this, Jeff. He shook his head and he said, but they won't listen to what I have to say. And I remember thinking how dumb his supervisor and those people must be, because my dad has a way to save the money, but they won't listen to him because he's not in management. But he's the one out there doing the job every day.
Why do you think executives become so close-minded about things like that?
Well, most of them I don't think today do. Some do, but I think it's because you don't need to get in a situation where you really think you know everything, first of all, because nobody knows everything. And I think we forget that it's the person doing the job every day out there who hears the customer every day, who sees the issues. They're the ones that really mean the most to the bottom line. They're the ones that carry our culture. I mean, I tell our folks all the time, when people think of Gulf Power, most of them, they don't think of a building, they don't think of a piece of paper that's our incorporation. A face comes to mind. Right. And it's mostly the people out there. It's our call center reps who handle 80% of our customer contacts, people in our local offices, it's our line technicians who are out there with our customers who have problems. So if executives don't understand that the face of our company is every one of those people out there, and if they're not respected and if they're not honored for what they do, then we have a real problem.
I've heard executives say, I can teach technical skills. It's very difficult to teach personal skills. Would you agree?
Absolutely. The most important job that I have is to put the right people in jobs, to be leaders. And one of the first things I look at is confidence, because you can train technical skills for the most part. On the other hand, the ability not just to get things done yourself, but to inspire and motivate others to do the best they can be, the person who can develop others to their fullest potential, that person is the most valuable manager.
Confidence, I would assume, to not be afraid that somebody's going to take their limelight, so to speak, is important.
If I don't have 3 to 5 people ready to take my job, if something happens to me tomorrow, then I'm not doing my job. And it takes confidence, though, to understand that's not threatening, that's actually a good thing. And I can rest at night knowing that whatever happens, Gulf Power is bigger than any person, and it always will be. Almost any company or organization you name is going to be bigger than any person. And as soon as we realize that and realize it's in our best interest to surround ourselves with the best people and hoping that many of them could step in and do what we do, that's the most effective executive or manager.
Let's talk about women in the business world. It seems to be the proverbial glass ceiling is certainly cracked, if not broken. Do you think?
You know, I do, and I don't want to minimize because I know in some areas it exists. It has not been an issue for me, and I believe it's because of what I said, because of having the technical background, having the experiences that were equivalent to the men in the company that I was in. And I've had wonderful mentors, and all my mentors were men, because I was the first female executive at Alabama Power, which I worked at for 15 years, a sister company of Gulf. But I had very unselfish mentors who gave me an opportunity to succeed, and then when I did, they weren't threatened. They were those confident managers who took happiness and joy out of me succeeding. So I'm very, very fortunate that I didn't have that. Now, I know it does exist some places, but I think that the more women are in management, that it becomes just a norm, and it's not, I don't mean that it's not unique, but it's not. You know, and you want to get to the point, the ultimate is you get to the point where the best person gets the job, period.
And I don't want to back in a corner on this, but do women make better managers than men? And I say this because women are often known as being much better at multitasking and much better listeners. Does that translate into the business world as a better manager?
I think that women have some characteristics that lead to that, and I think men have some characteristics that lead to that. I think we're better off when we take the best characteristics that are traditionally female and traditionally male. Let me give you an example. Female, I think you're right. I think that women in general, and I hate to stereotype or generalize at all, but I think women are looking for a way for the team to win. And I think that's very important. It's very important to me. A lot of men that I really admire and respect, they are, I think women sometimes can be a little more reserved and cautious about stepping out there for whatever reason. I think that men will tend to step out there more often than women will. I think we ought to learn from that. I think that men can learn from this team, and let's make sure that even at the end of the day, if you have to make the final decision, that people at least understand the decision you're making, even if they may not all agree with it. I think that we can learn from men this, if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Sometimes I think, and some of that comes when you're the first woman, and this is something I did face, when you're the first woman to do something, it's not if I fail, I'm failing, as Susan's story. If I fail, am I hurting all the women? You know, you just put so much pressure on yourself that I think that we've got to get away from that, and I think men do that really effectively. So the answer to your question is yes and no. I think that there are some characteristics women traditionally have that are great in a manager or a leader. I think there are characteristics that men bring to the table that are more characteristic of men traditionally, and that also is something we ought to take, and we ought to take the best of both.
You mentioned failure. Is it good to have a few failures along the way? Does it make you a better manager as you climb the ladder?
I think it does. I think the thing about failure that can be good or bad is how you deal with it. If you learn from it and pick yourself up and keep going, it's a good thing for you. You just have to make sure that it doesn't just devastate you. And that's the whole confidence factor.
Just a couple of bullet points, so to speak, for a young person in either high school or college who's about to launch into the career world. What sort of advice would you give?
Love what you do. Every morning I get up, I'm excited about going to work. And I know some people say, well, yeah, you're CEO, of course you would. But I've always been that way. And even in jobs, my career, gosh, in the 28 years I worked with Southern Company, I've had 21 different jobs. And I can honestly say every morning I got up and thought, I'm looking forward to going to work. Some of the jobs I enjoyed more than others, but I learned so much from each one. Each job taught me something different. Each supervisor I had or manager I had, I learned as much from the bad ones as the good ones. I'll never forget thinking from one who was just terrible, well, if I'm ever a supervisor, I will never do X, Y, and Z. Because I realized how bad it felt, not to get information and for him not to talk to me and these type of things. So you learn, this is good, and I will take something from this and it will make me better.
Your name was bantered around a couple of times, I believe, to maybe be an interim senator. And I guess your thoughts on that were?
I really, really appreciate Governor Christ and his office when they called and just said, would you be interested in throwing your name in to be considered? And my response was, I am so flattered, which I was, but I'm this geeky engineer that you started this program with. I'm this geeky engineer who loves power lines and loves what I do, so thank you. But, you know, I love public service, and I have so much admiration for all of our elected officials and our public servants. You know, they just do so much, but I love what I do.
Do politicians, though, do they need to have more of a businessman's or businesswoman's mentality?
I think it's very helpful. I think that from the perspective of let's set objectives, let's set goals, and most importantly, how do we define performance and how do we measure performance? I think that if there's one big carryover from business that is helpful in public life, it is accountability for performance. How do we measure success, and how do we take those measures and make sure that we don't make excuses for them? At the end of the day, sometimes there may be 1,000 reasons that I don't reach a goal or golf doesn't reach a goal, golf power. But at the end of the day, good tries should be celebrated, but, you know, have we done anything? Mm-hmm. You know, what have we really done? What have we done in economic development? What have we done in terms of the quality of life? What have we done in terms of the services we provide? And we have to make sure that we're always open for critique. You know, one of the hardest things we have to do in business is sit back and bite our lips or our tongue when people are giving us critique. And we get a lot of critique at Golf Power. And that's good, right, because the only way you ever make change is when somebody says, wait, things aren't working the way they are now. So I think if there's one thing to translate from the business world into the political world, it is the idea of accountability for results, and that we are not afraid to have performance measures to measure how we're doing. And whether it's education or anything, economic development or anything else we're doing in public life, there has to be accountability for performance.
30, 45 seconds left. We are certainly in challenging economic times, mm-hmm, by any stretch. Advice you give to folks out there in 30 seconds.
The best opportunity comes from times of challenge. When things are good, it's easy to sit back and let the good times roll and come in. When things are challenging, those people and organizations that take this as an opportunity to position themselves to take advantage of the upturn that I believe that we're starting to enter into are going to be the successes of the future.
Susan Story, it's been an extreme pleasure.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Thank you so very much.
Thanks.
One thing, will you come back again?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Susan Story is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Gulf Power Company, and she has been our guest for this edition of Conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for watching. Take good care of yourself, and we'll see you soon.